morning.
Good morning.
All right, happy Thursday. Today we're going to move on to oligopoly. Last class we talked about what? Anyone remember? Last class? What is that? Nice. 3 different degrees of price discrimination, pricing, nice. We talked about the things that have to exist for price discrimination to happen. Market power, no arbitrage. Remember what arbitrage means? Reselling. It's about reselling, right? Buy low, sell high. So you have you're on the lower part of the demand curve. In other words, your willingness and ability to pay for the good is lower than other people in the market. So you buy at a lower price and then resell it to those who are willing and able to buy at a higher price. Firms don't want this because they want to be the ones to sell to everyone. Right? Okay. Last class we also talked about monopoly. We said monopoly is the perfect example here because they're the one firm. It's a perfect example to talk about pricing because they're the one firm in the market. They control supply and they have market power. Today we're going to move on to oligopoly. Oligopoly is closer to monopoly on that spectrum as a market structure spectrum. Before I start writing notes though, I'm passing around this paper with the orange border background. This one, the econ department is asking students to attend it so you can hear from someone who was an econ major and chose their career that doesn't necessarily look like what we expect from an econ major. In addition to that, he's going to talk about the different options you have as an economist, how you can make the skills you're learning here actually work for you in the job market. If you have time, if you can go. I'm told it's worth the attendance. I haven't gone yet. I think I might go to this one so I can speak on it as someone who has heard about it. It can't hurt, at the very least. You probably noticed that we haven't done the virtual exchange portion of our course. I mentioned this last week, I believe. Our partners in the UK did not get enough students, so we couldn't run the program for this section of our course this semester. What that means is that our grading policy is a little bit different. So if you remember, 15% of your grade is for participation, and is it 15% or 20%? 15? It's for participation and virtual exchange. Well, now it's going to be just participation. It's a big, big percentage. Participation includes coming to class, literally just class attendance. Your attendance is updated consistently by our teaching assistant here, Josh. Check it on iCollege. Make sure. Remember, you have 3 classes that will not be counted. So 3 absences, everyone gets 3 absences for whatever reason. I advise that you keep those absences for actual emergencies so that when emergencies happen, it doesn't hurt your grade. But if you use it for, I woke up today and today's just not the day, your choice. But if an emergency happens, then you have no other option. We're in the last stretch of our course. Now we're talking a lot about market structures. We're talking about where firms fit within market structures. And this is an intermediate level class, so we're not just talking about these market structures. We're doing some math within these market structures, right? So we're trying to figure out the Q star for firms that exist in these market structures. We're figuring out the pricing. We're figuring out what competition looks like between firms in these markets, if there's competition. With the goal of making optimal decisions for firms. Any questions? Yeah.
Are you doing extra credit on the
So today we're talking about oligopoly. The market structure. We said basically exists on a spectrum where perfect competition is on one end of it, and on the other extreme end is monopoly. We've talked about perfect competition and we've talked about monopoly. We said in perfect competition, this is the ideal market where there are multiple firms, multiple buyers, full information. There is technical and allocative efficiency. Much more. Monopoly, the extreme other end, it's the polar opposite of perfect competition in terms of the firms, where there's only one firm. There's market power for that firm because they can set price higher than the cost of producing that last good that they sold in the market. We even talked about pricing where they can, with that market power, set different prices for different groups of people in the market. Today we're going to talk about oligopoly. Which is closer to monopoly on this market structure. Let's take some notes. We're going to build a a theoretical framework, and then we're going to do some mathematical analysis within this framework. So, oligopoly. This is a market structure in which a small number of firms has the large majority of market share. Oligopoly is similar to monopoly, except oligopoly is similar to monopoly, so it's closer to monopoly on that spectrum. Monopoly, except that rather than one firm, and one firm is monopoly, one firm. So rather than one firm, two or more firms dominate the market. It will require completely different tools to analyze the oligopoly market structure. One, oligopolists are large, and this is the key part, they know that their actions have an effect on one another. barriers to entry exist preventing firms from taking away profits. The second structure of oligopoly here helps us see why it's closer to monopoly than it is to perfect competition, right? Because we know with perfect competition, in the long run, profits are zero because of free entry and exit. But with oligopoly, just like monopoly, there are barriers that prevent other firms from entering to compete away the profits that those bigger firms in the market already experience. How to identify oligopoly. A useful tool for identifying the type of market, this type of market, is the four-firm concentration ratio, which is the fraction of an industry's sales as a total revenue accounted for by its four largest firms. Four-firm concentration ratio larger than 40% tends to indicate an oligopoly. There's obviously a scrutiny for this class. Alright, so why do oligopolies exist? Oligopolies often exist because of barriers to entry, for example, economies of scale. These reasons I'm going to list here, these are not new. We've talked about this quite often in our course, but I'm writing them here so we see that they also relate to oligopoly markets. Too expensive to start small. Two, ownership of a key input. Examples. Alcoa, which is a bauxite or aluminum. Production. De Beers is another one. Company that has ownership over key inputs, diamonds, Ocean Spray, another, cranberries, government, impose barriers, examples, occupational licensing, or dentists, doctors, accountants, patents, the exclusive right to a product for a period of 20 years from the date the patent is filed with the government. Tariffs, and quotas, imposed on foreign companies. These are just some of the different ways that firms have lobbied the government to get either rules put in place to ensure the existence of an oligopoly or ownership of key inputs to ensure the existence of an oligopoly. Why would a firm want to exist in the oligopoly market? More profit. Profit lasts longer. There's more profit, the profit will last. What else? Less competition. How about market power? It's a big one. Any examples of a monopoly market that we can think of in real life that are existing right now? As we speak? Yeah, Jack?
Fast food.
Fast food. Very nice. What are some of those big companies?
McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's.
At the start of this entire thing, we said that we have to treat the way we analyze firms in the oligopoly market differently. Because they know that they're so big that one action that, for instance, McDonald's does will affect Burger King and Wendy's. So when they are deciding their profit maximizing quantity, they need to make sure they consider the decisions made by Burger King and the decisions made by Wendy's. Any other industries? Yes, ma'am.
The video game industry. There's only three big ones. You got Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo. And you got people that can come in, but every time they come in, they always fail. And then whatever Xbox does, PlayStation has to kind of follow.
Absolutely. What do we think is keeping these firms at the top?
Can't start
Which
small.
of these things?
It's hard to start small.
It's hard to start small. Barriers to entry here. Yeah, Jenny. Say again? Ownership? Is that what you said? Oh, another example. Oil industry, absolutely. So for the first two, Rico gave us the reason why we could see oligopolies in these industries, right? Barriers to entry. It's hard to start small. Stan also mentioned that when firms start in the video game industry, they tend to fail. I don't know why. Why is that happening?
Because
Acquisition.
acquisitions are big ones with different companies, acquire other different companies, and they grow larger. And those three companies been there from the start, so it's like it's hard for like Google try to get like their own console and it fails because everybody cares about Xbox and PlayStation. So I guess kind of what other people say, it's kind of hard to start small in an industry that's already been large and already been established.
Marketing would also have to play a huge role in that, right? Because if you look at the camera industry, similar to the gaming industry, when you look at companies like Fujifilm or Canon, where they have been in that industry for a long time, it's if you were to start a new firm to sell the same product, you would have to spend a lot of money on marketing in order to get your product across the market.
Barriers to entry, where one of those things is establishing your voice and your brand in the industry. Absolutely.
So for the gaming also, either you already have a console that you're gonna keep, or you're not gonna start doing one.
So there's a high barrier to entry for the firm, but also for the customers. If you're an economist and you're like, okay, I feel like this is the only barrier to the success of my firm, is that people, customers, don't want to have to pay for the gaming console since they already have one. Would it work to say, okay, then let's have a promotion where we give them the console and then we charge for the games? Would that work in this industry?
But you already have all the games that you play, like based on for a specific console.
Wouldn't it be like ownership of key input? Cause like those gaming consoles make their own games too.
Right? So we see that there's this barrier here. And we're like, okay, we can overcome that. We can think of ways to overcome that. But then something else happens. Key input. Right? So we have to think of ways to overcome this to exist in this market. Do they have patents? Those things? So at the establishment of these firms and their growth, there were economists who realized that to ensure that profits don't get competed away, they need to put up certain naturally existing boundaries in this industry that will keep them at the top of their game.
Professor, you mentioned that oligopolies need to take into account what the other firms, what the other oligopoly firms would, what their decisions would be. Could you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, we're gonna see it in our calculations in this next step. So when, for instance, a monopoly is deciding on their profit maximizing quantity, right, they pay, it's not study mathematical. They choose the Q star where MR is equal to MC. We have been talking about this for most of the semesters. We know that this is our profit maximizing condition. Yeah, when they're looking at marginal revenue is a derivative of total revenue with respect to Q, their Q. Their demand function includes just their Q. So this could be 300 minus Q. This Q here is for just their firm. Even if we're doing this for PC, the quantity we would be looking at would be 300 minus lowercase q, just the Q for that firm. If you remember when we did this for Xavier. Now, when we're in oligopoly though, Burger King knows that when he makes quantity decisions, whatever they decide affects McDonald's, will affect Wendy's, and whatever Wendy's does will affect them and McDonald's. So their demand function is now 300 minus the quantity from Wendy's, the quantity from Burger King, and their own quantity is left. McDonald's from McDonald's. So their total revenue function depends on not just their quantity, but on the quantity of the other big firms in their markets. We'll see mathematically. But yes, that's how it shows up. Go ahead, John.
When you say they are in cahoots more often than they're like stepping on each other's toes?
Great question. So Jack is asking, since they know that they're going to affect each other, why compete against each other? Right? Why not collude? It's a good question. We will see how it works. Go ahead, Jenny.
I was gonna say some collusion.
Go ahead.
Is collusion illegal?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It is illegal, yes, antitrust. But in addition to including it in the law, strictly including it in the law that we cannot collude, we will see that naturally collusion by itself is not sustainable. The main reason for that is that there is an incentive to cheat in the collusion. So if we all agree to keep our production levels low, right? If production levels are low, then there's less quantity in the market, which means there's more competition amongst consumers for that quantity, and they'll be willing to pay more for that stuff. Does that make sense? So keeping your production low increases the price of the good. Low quantity, high price, law of demand. Now, if we all agree to keep quantity low, but then Wendy's decides Burger King and McDonald's are going to keep quantity low, which is going to decrease our price. But if I increase my quantity by just a little bit, I will still see this higher prices, but sell more of my stuff at the higher prices. They have an incentive to cheat. And their cheating will hurt Burger King and McDonald's because that higher quantity will decrease the price, So at that now new lower price, Burger King and McDonald's are also selling lower quantity. Total revenue sinks. That's complicated and interesting. So we're going to talk about Cornell. We're also going to talk about Stackelberg and Bertrand. These are econometricians who did the mathematical analysis of this economic theory to figure out if there is a point of stability in this market. If there is a way for us to find Q star for each of these firms in this market where they don't need to depend on people being good. They don't need to depend on other firms not cheating. If they act in their own best interest of maximizing profit, is there a point of stability? Is there an equilibrium? And the answer is yes. So we're going to, it's intermediate micro, we're going to work our way through now to do the calculations. Before we do though, Jenny brought up a great point about the oil industry. There is a cartel, OPEC. I feel like the C there is cartel or corporation that exists in the oil industry, and their goal is to keep production of oil down so the prices stay up. But what they do, we will see, is that they have to enforce. They have to enforce their rules that they pick. I'm trying to not get too wild before I say. So one reason why the oil industry would exist, ownership of the key inputs, that's key. So countries own this, absolutely. It leads to, I'm going to stop there. It leads to a very not so great actions by people who understand the mechanisms of what allows the market to work on its own. If you understand the incentives that cause people to act the way they do, then you can create boundaries at the start of your firm that will just act naturally as your firm grows or as your country grows. But that's deeper. Before we get that far, let's look at the Cornell oligopoly model.
Dr. Arabian comment.
Yeah.
Because you said countries, it got me thinking, has oligopoly
Listed? Yeah.
yeah, has that ever been applied to like the EU, considering those countries to be like little small monopolies?
Yeah.
'Cause
Why did they form the union?
To collude, to,
Increase their power.
yeah.
So as opposed to stepping on each other's toes, they've consolidated their power so that they can compete on a larger scale, which is the world. Yeah.
Wait, so there's no regulation against that? When you come-
Who's
Well,
going
when
to
you make the
regulate
regulations, then it
The
would
EU.
I'm sorry?
Who will regulate the EU?
I don't know,
The UN?
yeah.
Who pays for the UN? Very important to understand the things going on in the back, so we understand, when we as economists see the things that are happening, the decisions that are being made by politicians, by governments, we know the incentive, right? We know why they're doing things that they're doing. The goal, my hope for you is that you take this knowledge and use it for good, right? You see the things that are happening in the background so that you can go into the background and make better decisions that lead to better outcomes. Someone's hand was up. Yep.
How come the US will government can stabilize the countries in OPEC and not the countries in the EU?
EU doesn't have oil. They have other things, but also at the establishment of certain oligopolistic powers, things were created that would prevent countries like the United States from doing this. That's why the United States is the United States and not a bunch of different little countries in Northern America. That doesn't exist in, that has been destroyed in certain countries. So these structures that exist to create boundaries around the oligopolies do not exist in certain other economies. Please note that it's going to get mathematically intense. It's not hard math, it's just a lot of steps that we're going to be going through. But they are worth knowing. If something isn't clear, let me know. So we're going to talk about the Cournot oligopoly model. In 1838, Cournot wrote a paper that showed, or that explained how oligopoly firms behave if they simultaneously choose how much quantity or output they produce. One more thing. So I remember Jack asked, like, why would they just collude? And then Jenny said, well, we have laws that exist to prevent them from colluding. Those laws prevent them from merging even further, right? So if they merge and become one monopoly, then there is no chance of cheating because McDonald's profit is Burger King's profit, and that's also Wendy's profit, right? It's one big firm. So what the laws have done is prevent the bigger firms from getting even bigger in the effort of keeping some power for the customers, for consumers. Yeah, because they have great economists on their team, that's why. So, Tabitha's question was, why was T-Mobile able to purchase? What did they purchase? Sprint.
Or that's what you did.
The way they do this, remember, I already erased it. Our definition of oligopoly boils down to industry, right? We said in this industry, there are these firms that exist to control whatever power exists in it. If you're able to redefine what an industry looks like, then the laws that are written to prevent antitrust, collusion, or merging can be skirted. So they have lawyers and economists. You would hope that the government would also have good lawyers and economists as well, who could notice what was happening. But consumers do not have a collective. We do not collude. If we did, then that wouldn't happen. Does that make sense? Like, each person does not have enough power to exercise any kind of influence over T-Mobile buying Sprint. But if we form the collusion, which is what government is supposed to do, or be, then we can collect our power to stop this from happening. Why? Why do we care? Why would we want to stop that from happening as consumers?
So we don't have to remind you of us.
In what way? Raising prices. Remember, what this does, the mergers do, is increase market power. And with market power, you can charge higher prices. Simple and short. And we saw from last class that if they do charge different prices to different consumers, they can do it to the extreme or perfectly, where they can take all of the consumer surplus and turn it into profit. Does that make sense? But like, who talks about consumer surplus? If you haven't taken this class, that wouldn't make sense to you. It's like, who are you talking to? But as an economist, you understand what's going on in the background. So, to illustrate this model, as simply as possible, we start by making 4 restrictive assumptions. We assume that. The markets last for only one period. Each firm, or therefore, each firm chooses quantity or price. So Bertrand's equilibrium or oligopoly model is a price model, or Carnot's model is a quantity model. Only once. 2, the firms act simultaneously. 3, all firms are identical. As in they have the same cost functions and produce identical, undifferentiated products. Same cell towers. 4, initially, the oligopoly has only 2, what we'll call duo firms. A duopoly. That increase the number of firms in the oligopoly market. We're actually not going to do the math for increasing the number of firms in the oligopoly market in this class. But that's the typical process for going through a Carnot oligopoly model. We're going to just stick with the duopoly. So now we're going to work through an example, Carnot duopoly. Carnot duopoly. Example. So, let us assume that there are 2 firms, right, the duopoly, 2 firms in this market, our definition of markets here is, flights between Chicago and LA. The airline industry is another industry that has taken quite heavy advantage of the benefits that come with establishing an oligopoly, where they control airspace. Okay. The market is flights between Chicago and LA. The firms are American Airlines, okay, and United Airlines, UA. The total number of passengers flown by these two firms is, well, let's call that Q, is the sum of QA, which is the quantity flown by American, passengers flown by American, So the sum of QA and QU, that's passengers flown by United. No other firms or companies can enter this market because they cannot obtain landing rights at both airports. So now with this, the marginal cost for both firms is $147. Remember, they're identical in that they have the same cost function. One of our key assumptions. And market demand is QP is equal to 339 minus P. Notes here that QD is the total quantity of the two airlines, let's see, combined and measured in thousands. Key is the dollar cost of a one-way flight. If you remember from a previous class, and even your assignments, if your marginal cost, I believe I said this 2 classes ago, but I'm not entirely sure. But if your marginal cost is just a fixed number, then your marginal cost is also your average cost. So this will also be equal to our average cost for both firms. We care about average cost because that's how we determine profit. Okay, so we have all this information. We need to answer now. Plots the best response functions of each firm on the same graph. With American Airlines on the horizontal axis. 2. What is a Cournot equilibrium strategy for each firm? So what this is asking is, what is Q star for American and what is Q star for United? Star being profit maximizing quantity. 3. What will be the price in the market? 4. What is profit for each firm with the Cournot equilibrium? How does the total output level compare to the collusion output level? So this question follows Jack and Emmy's line of thought, where if there are these big firms and they know that what in the market or in the industry, and they know that what one of them does affects the other, why don't they just collude? So we're going to suppose that they do collude and find the market output level in the firm as a result of their collusion. 6. Well, the collusion lasts. Why? Why not? Again, we'll be able to answer that question. 7. Let me stop this. So that's a lot of questions, and we're going to work through every single one of them together in a group, as in class. And please ask questions if you have any as we go through. The first question asks us to draw the best response function for American Airlines and United Airlines for these flights between Chicago and LA. Now, a best response function tells us, shows the profit maximizing quantity or output for one firm considering any action as in quantity choice of the other firms in the market. So if we say that United's best response function is equal to 300 minus Q United, so whatever American does. So United's best response function considers American's quantity. So this function tells us Q star for United, regardless of whatever quantity American chooses. Yeah.
Did you divide by 4 because of the 4 firm, or was
No,
it-
I just picked a random number.
Alright, so it wasn't-
This equation is absolutely random. We're going to solve for it. And I want you to understand what we're solving for. So what this means is, this is Q star for United, the function, given any quantity level of American. So if American Airlines flies 80 passengers, if Q American is 80 passengers, what would be United's profit maximizing quantity or number of passengers? What's the process? What do you do? 300 minus 80 divided by 8, which is 300 minus 10. Because of the way we will derive this profit maximizing function, this number will always be the profit maximizing number for that firm. We use the MR equals MC optimality condition to derive the best response function for the duopoly, for the oligopoly firm. In this case, it's duopoly. Okay, so now that you understand what it is we're calculating, like why we even want this information, let's go ahead and do it. So, the quantity that each firm chooses depends on the residual, on its residual demand curve and its marginal cost. Remember, marginal revenue is a derivative of total revenue, which is P times Q, and P is the demand curve for that firm. So what do we mean by a residual demand curve though? Residual demand curve is the market demand that is not met by other sellers at any given price. So for our analysis here, we need to be anchoring our thought processes as we go through, which is kind of why I'm walking you through it this way. So you understand what our goal is and certain check-in points for you to be. Okay, so residual demand curve is whatever of the market that was sold by just that firm, or that was not sold by all the other firms in the market. For our example, we want if United flies QU, then American flies QA, which is the big market quantity minus the quantity flown by United. This is the residual demand for American Airlines. Right, where it's just the market quantity minus whatever it is United did. So whatever is left is what American did. Which means, similarly, the residual demand for United is, so QU here, the amount flown by United will be equal to the market quantity minus whatever was flown by American. We have equations, so let's apply it. This is the way we introduce the activity of the other firms into the equation for United or American. So we know that market demand is Q is equal to 339 minus P. Therefore, residual demand for, let's do American first. American Airlines is QA will be equal to big Q minus QU, which is 339 minus P minus QU. All we've done here is plug in our market demand function into our residual demand equation. Similarly, QU will be equal to 339 minus P minus QA. So these residual demand functions, each firm can think of itself as having a monopoly with respect to the people who don't fly on the other, or with the other airline. Why does this matter for us? Well, because we know how to find Q star from monopolists. Therefore, let's be specific. We can determine the best response function What does the best response function do for us? Why do we care about this? I'm trying to highlight to you certain key points in our calculation here. So we can determine the best response function for each firm using their residual demand function and marginal cost function. Let's begin with American Airlines. So for the best response function, we need for American's best response function, we need to set MR for American equals to the marginal cost for American. Because we know MR equals MC is the optimality condition for the firm. Always. We're just dealing with the world now where there are all these big firms and we need to find it for each specific big firm in the market. So, marginal revenue for American is equal to the derivative of total revenue for American with respect to quantity for American. Total revenue for American Airlines is equal to price in the market times quantity sold by American, or the number of passengers flown by American. Price in the markets, we can get it from our demand function because we know our demand function is how we determine price for the different goods sold in the market. If market demand is Q is equal to 339 minus P, then price will be equal to, we're just solving for P, right? That will be 339 minus Q. True? We know that Q is just, big Q here, it's just the sum of Americans' quantity, number of passengers flown by American, and the number of passengers flown by United. So price is equal to 339 minus the number of passengers flown by American minus the number of passengers flown by United. Notice that we could have calculated this or solved for P from the residual demand function for American. If we have this here as the residual demand function for American, then we can just solve for the price that they will face, which is the market price. Well, then we'll just take this Q to the other side and bring this to this. Okay, so P will be equal to 339 minus QA minus QU. So, let's put that in here. Our total revenue is equal to, total revenue for American, 339 minus QA minus QU times QA. We're multiplying this by the quantity for American because we're looking for the total revenue for American Airlines. They only flew QA, number of passengers. Okay, we can expand this. So we have 339 times QA minus QA squared minus QU, QA. That is our total revenue for American Airlines. Now we can take this derivative with respect to QA. So marginal revenue for American will be equal to the derivative of total revenue for American with respect to the quantity flown by American. Notice that we're comparing all of our calculations here to the firm that we care about in this market. So this will be equal to the derivative of 339 QA minus QA squared minus QU QA with respect to QA. This derivative ends up being 339 minus 2 times QA minus QU. Marginal cost for American Airlines is 147. The question gave us that. I will stop here and we'll continue our calculation for fresh response function from here. If you didn't sign in, make sure you do. The attendance sheet is somewhere around. Who has it? Who has the attendance sheet?